Okay, hello, I'm Tony. I'm a retired colonel in the Army. I did 29 years in the Army, and throughout all my service in the military, when I was in the continental United States, I did my own maintenance on my own vehicles, basically to save money. And in those days, each Army post had an auto craft shop where there was tools, some expert advice, car lifts, all those sorts of things you need to work on vehicles. And since I've retired from the Army, I've become kind of a local fix-it man in my neighborhood. And I've worked on everything from tractors to trucks, from chainsaws to chippers. And when I get called to help somebody with a vehicle, it's usually somebody that's left a vehicle over the winter. They come back in the spring and it won't start. And generally that's a fuel problem. So what I'm going to talk to you today is about how to properly winterize a vehicle. And you don't need much to do that. I'm going to show you what I've got here in front of me. You might need some antifreeze. You'll need a fuel treatment. These are a couple of the fuel treatments that I recommend. Seafoam, which works very well. If you come back and there's a little water in your fuel, you can run seafoam through, and it'll clean out the jets in the carburetors and fuel injection systems to get them running better. This stuff here is what I use to treat the fuel, to winterize it. It's called Startron, and it has the added benefit is that it fixes these ethanol fuels that we have nowadays so that they actually run better. It'll stabilize for 3 years, and it has a drying agent in it. To check your antifreeze, you need an antifreeze tester, some kind of a baster thing or battery filler to get water out of the distilled water to fill your battery cells, and you need distilled water. You can't use tap water. Minerals in tap water will corrode your battery and make them function less well. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to do is I've got a vehicle here that I use this vehicle in the summers mostly, and I'll park this thing in the winter. And what I do is I want to check the antifreeze to make sure it is up to the specification. I'm in cold country. I like to have a 50-50 mix of water to antifreeze, which gives you about 37 to 40 below protection, which is good enough here in the North Country. So you want to take your antifreeze tester, fill it with your antifreeze, and check. And you can see here I've got 37 to 43 below protection. That's perfect. Nothing left to do on the antifreeze. Now, if it didn't have the proper protection, I'd take this bucket, drain some antifreeze, and then put in full strength antifreeze until I got to the level of the protection that I need, and that's based on where you live in the country. You know, if you live in Florida, you can get by with a lot less protection than in Montana, for example. So once you've checked your antifreeze, the next thing to check is your battery. You want to make sure that the battery has fluid in it, and most batteries have caps that you can take off. If you have a battery that does not allow you to do any maintenance, then you don't need to do it. You'll just need a new battery after about 5 to 7 years. Anyway, pop the caps off, check the antifreeze or the water level in your battery, and there's a line inside that you can see, and just make sure the water's filled up, and use distilled water. And then what I do when I leave the vehicle for extended periods of time, I unhook the negative battery cable, set it aside, and then you won't have anything that draws on your battery and hurts the battery. And then in the spring, it'll generally start right up. There's plenty of juice in the battery. If not, of course, then you can charge the battery. The next thing we want to talk about is fuel. And I live in the North Country, and I want to have my tanks full at all times. If you leave a vehicle with half a tank, quarter of a tank, you have a lot of space in there for condensation. And what happens is water condensation develops in the tank, water gets into your gas, it can rust out your gas tanks, and it makes it a lot of trouble to start the vehicle come spring. Also, in vehicles that I use throughout the winter, I keep the tanks up to avoid the condensation. So what you want to do is, when you winterize a vehicle, you fill the gas tanks. Some people say drain them. No, fill them, keep them totally full, and treat the gas tanks with some sort of a stabilizer. And I recommend this product, StarTron. It works good with the ethanol fuels, stabilizes the gas for 3 years again, and it works as a drying agent and keeps the contaminants or the water out of your fuel. And then you do that, and they'll run fine. They'll start up in the spring. Another thing you might want to do, if you have a covered area to keep your vehicle, leave the hood up. I've run into problems. Just a month ago, a guy called me, oh, my 86 Bronco, full-size Bronco, is running like crap. We went in there, I looked at it, and a rat had built a nest near the fuel injectors, and what they did, the wires going to the fuel injectors were in their way, so they just chewed them off. So we had to fix that. A lot of times, if you leave the hood open, they won't want to get in here because it's not a covered space. So that's another thing you want to do if you leave a vehicle for the winter. Okay, folks, let me level with you. You can see I'm not young and pretty. I'm probably not going to be one of the Power Nation stars. And I don't want to move to wherever your shop is. I'm not interested in that. I want to stay here in Montana. But I have a proposition for you. As you can see, I've got two original 66 to 77 Broncos. This one's a 67. It's got a 289 V8. This was rolled before I got it. The top was totally flat. All the fenders were dinged in. The tail sections were dinged in. It was a mess. And I put it back together so that it would run, and I used it to plow snow in my neighborhood here for years. Last year, I did a backyard paint job on it, and this vehicle is amazing in that it has absolutely no rust. It's uncut. It hasn't been cut for fender wells. This vehicle retains a lot of value because of that. And my proposition is, I will give you this Bronco to do with whatever you want. Fix it up however you want. I can just see the extreme off-road guys now. I mean, before, all they had to work with was Scouts, and man, they're going to get a Bronco. And this is a step up. And do with it whatever you want. Auction it through your favorite auction house. But what I want is that some of the proceeds, and we can talk about that, go to veterans' causes for this vehicle. That's what I want in return for donation. Another thing I want in return is, here is a 76 Bronco that I want to keep. It has Dana 44 front end with disc brakes, has power brakes, power steering. It has the preferred J-shift transfer case that Broncos had in the later years. and I would like a body off restoration on this vehicle to save it. It's starting to rust, a lot of surface rust. There are a couple of bad spots that would be simple to fix. But a body off restoration on this Bronco, and you guys did a Bronco a few years ago, and I watched that intently, and what you had when you were done was not a Bronco. You changed everything on it, and that's really not necessary with these. These were good vehicles. I've used these in every climate, every situation, sand dunes, snow, mud. They're good vehicles. They have the super strong Ford 9-inch rear end. But there's a couple things I'd like upgraded on this for more performance, like lockers and maybe a couple things with the engine. But I'd like to keep it a carbureted engine, believe it or not, because in this country there are a lot less maintenance. So anyway, that's my proposition. If you're interested, of course you can contact me, and we'll see what we can work out. Thank you, and thank you for your show.